Okay, we're ready to go. Thank you everyone for joining us today. The plan is that I'm going to go through the list of features and explain what each of them is for. The only one I'm not going to go into really deep detail on is our multi-member database. I'm going to give you a sense of what the features are, and anyone interested in getting more information can let me know. We will be doing some more lengthy videos on how that particular feature works, and of course anyone who wants to investigate joining together in a multi-member database will need to be in touch with us so that we can arrange that. So our plan is to work directly with those who would like to pursue that as an option. For those not already, who haven't already checked out the videos on YouTube, we do have a number of videos about the specific features we're doing that are already up on YouTube, and there are going to be more over the next couple of weeks as we go through our list and make sure we've covered everything off. But there are quite a few there already, so hopefully if you need a bit of a reference back to one specific feature, each of the features or a group of related features should have one short video just on that feature, so you don't have to come back and rewatch this entire video if you just want a little bit of a reference on one of these features. And of course we do have the message board for any questions that I'm not able to cover today. If you do have a question, you can use the little raise your hand tool or type in the questions window to let me know that you have a question. Because we are in webinar mode, everyone is muted except the speaker, which would be me. If you do wish to speak, you can make a request and I will unmute you and give you the ability to speak if you prefer to ask your question vocally rather than type it into the questions box. All right, with that, I'm going to get started. The list that you see in front of you right now, I can send this Excel spreadsheet to anyone who wants it, but this is simply an output from our CIOC features database. The link to the features for this release was sent out in the alert list that went, the alert list notice that went out about the release that's coming out this weekend. So you can follow that link to see a list of all of the features that are part of this release. And we will be continuing to use that as our means of communicating to you what is in each release. From the front page of the feature database, at the very bottom, you will always see a list of our past and upcoming releases and features that have been assigned to those releases. So for example, we have an upcoming client tracker release, and if you click on that, it will tell you the features that we plan to be in that release. And even our next online resources release, which is scheduled for the fall, we've already assigned a couple of features to that, and we'll continue to assign features as we decide what's going to be in that release. So I encourage you to continue to use this as a resource to find out how the software is changing, and as a reference, if you can't remember what changed in a release, this is always available for you to go and check. Do we have any questions right off the bat that I can address about the process or this release? Just generally about this release this weekend, if you have any concerns, rather than about the specific changes in the software. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, well then I will proceed. So I'm going to be, this spreadsheet isn't going to move off the screen in a minute, but this is what I'm going to be using as my list that I'm going through today. And again, I can send this Excel sheet to anyone who wants it if you would find it useful. The first and biggest feature in this release is the ability to have more than one member in a single database. As I indicated, I'm not going to go into huge detail about it because it's a really giant, involved change that I could spend hours just explaining. So I want people to have a sense, though, about what this does offer, if it's something that appeals to you, that you want to investigate, you know, moving into partnerships with other members, or for those of you that have already merged databases, if you want to consider what the value would be of each of you returning to having your own membership within the same database. I'd like to give you a bit of an understanding of what features that will give to you and what it would mean for you on a day-to-day basis in comparison to what you have now. So the major feature, obviously, is the ability to share records with one another instantly rather than having to use import-export tools. To do that, we have a feature called the sharing profile. Give a quick view of what a sharing profile looks like. So sharing profiles are a description of a contract between two members. And the software does try to enforce it like a contract, meaning you send your partner a very specific list of what things they're going to be allowed to do, how changes can be made, how much notice you have to be given if they're going to take records away, and which fields can they access? Are they allowed to update? Are they allowed to add publications? All of those things are covered as part of the sharing profile, and the software enforces it like a contract. So if I say that the records can be used in print tools, then any of the fields that they've been given access to, they could create a print profile and use that record in the print tools. If I say they cannot use it in the print tools, they would not get access to it through any of CIOC's print tools. And the same can be said for export. If the sharing profile says you're not allowed to export my records, then they would have access to view it in record details and search it and all that, but they couldn't export it. If I say that they're not allowed to use it in export tools, then it would be blocked from use in export tools, for example. So you have really very detailed control over what your partner can do with it. You can, for those of you that use privacy profiles, you can specify whether they have access to private fields and which views even they can use it in. So if you had a very specific contract where I'm going to let you have access to these records, but this is for a special project and it's only for this one view, you could be that specific and say, I'm only going to give you access to this record in this specific view and you can't use it in any of your other views. So this is very, very detailed, I would say, a contract between you and your partner. Each record that you have in your database is part of just one contract with each partner you have. So you may have one set of records that's in one contract because it's only for a special project, and then you may have another set of records where your partner needs to use them on a day-to-day basis and really needs a lot more access to it, and they can be part of a different contract. So you can have more than one contract with any partner in your database. Part of your sharing profile will list all the fields that you have access to. Some of them are automatic. So for instance, you can't not share the org level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't not share the data deleted or created, the located in community, the areas served. There are certain fields that are used for searching that you're not allowed to say they can't have them. So this will let you know at the time that you're creating the sharing profile that there are certain things that are going to be shared automatically. It's not a choice. In some cases, they're member-specific, like publication fields. If you have private publication codes that are just for you, those wouldn't get shared with your partner, but they may also have private publication codes that are just for them that they could assign to your records, and only they would see them. So there are what we call the member-specific fields, too, that change depending on which member is viewing them. Another example of that would be all the statistics fields. Each partner has their own statistics of when that record was viewed, and they don't get mixed up. So if my record is being viewed in my partner's views, right, if I create my own data management view and I have some records shared with me, those statistics get counted in my membership, not the person who owns the record. So these are all member-specific fields. And then you can pick other fields that are optionally shared with your partner, there's a lot of them, and decide what specifically they have access to. In addition, you can add and remove records using various tools that we have. And we have what we call a revocation period, which protects you in the contract and says, before this contract can be taken away, this is how much notice you have to give. And that's to avoid the situation of someone sort of pulling the rug out of someone else and suddenly taking away all the records without notice. Part of the contract says how much notice has to be given to you before they can take that information away. So if you decided 30 days was a reasonable notice for them to have to give you in order to end the contract, then the software would force you to give a 30-day notice before you could end the contract. So that's the incredibly high level of sharing profiles. Again, I don't want to, I could spend the whole call explaining how all this works, but the idea here is it's a contract system, and it's a way for you to decide exactly how you want every record in your database to be shared or not shared. And it can be, you know, not all your records have to be shared in the same way, and you have complete control over what you decide the partner you're sharing with is allowed to do with your records. To begin with, just to be clear, nobody is getting put in the same database. I think that message has gone out all along, but I do want to be 100% clear that CIOC is not going to put people together without them asking to be put together. So after this release happens, everyone will continue to be alone in their database just as they always were. Okay, so besides the sharing profile, which, as I say, is a major thing that people gain from this system of having a multi-member database, there are certain things, parts of the setup that become shared. We've done everything we could to make it so that those of you who do not have partners in your database, other members in your database, aren't going to see all the complexity of, you know, these are my values, these are your values, these are the values we share. So when you get your upgrade, hopefully you will not see a lot of the things that you may see today during my demonstration, where it has, you know, these are my local publications, these are my shared publications, these are publications that other members have as their own local publications. All of this complexity should be hidden from you after the upgrade, because we don't want to make your software more complicated than it needs to be until you have another member in your database where it matters whether or not a publication is shared, for example. So you will not see 3 different lists of publications after the upgrade. You will just see your list of publications as you always did. But for people who do choose to make use of this multi-member database, it will mean I can have my own private values that the other members in my database don't see or use. Then we can have these shared values that everyone agrees we can have access to. And then the other partners in my database may also have their own private values that are not for me to use. And if you don't want to use any of the shared values, most of the areas of the software will allow you to hide a shared value that you're not interested in using. So let's say most of the members in your database all use this CIOC publication code, but you're not involved in a contract with the CIOC, so you have no interest in having that publication code anywhere on your forms because it doesn't apply to you. You can hide that shared value, so even though all the other members in your database might use it, if you hide it, it will not appear on your data entry forms, and it will be like it doesn't exist to you. So you don't have to have the clutter of things that you don't use. And that kind of separation occurs throughout most of the checklists and areas of the database. We do have some detailed documentation about which things are shared, which things are local, and so on for anyone who wants to get more information and understand, so which things are mine and which things do I have to share with others. But for the most part, we're trying to allow people to have things private to themselves as much as possible. So all of your general setup options, all your agencies, all your users, design templates, views, all of these things are just for you. They're not shared. So in your list of views, you would not see any views from another member in your database. They're all private to you. You would not see users for another member in your database. They're all private to you. Your general setup options are just for you. Your Excel profiles, your export profiles, those are all just for you, and not visible in any way to any other member in the database. Okay, I'm going to ask now if there are any immediate questions that I can answer about the multi-member system, because if there are some immediate things that people would like to understand about it, I would certainly want to address those. All right, I've got one question here. Let me. Is there to be a single super-duper super user? Yes, there is. We call it a global super user. So we have 2 different kinds of super users in a multi-member database. Again, this is not going to apply to all of you right after you're upgraded. It will be business as usual. But if you do move into a multi-member database, we would be working with you to identify 1 or more users from within the set of members who will have permissions at the global super user level. What the global super user can do is edit all those values that everybody shares. So when I was in that publication section, for example, in the shared publications, I have to be a global super user to be able to come in and change details about shared publications, whereas the local ones, the ones that apply just to my membership, any local super user or regular super user can modify those. And certainly any local super user can also choose to hide things from their own membership, where the global super user's role is to edit those things that apply to everybody in the same database. So that would be the list of shared publications. In a checklist, it would be the list of shared checklists or the list of shared distributions. And the global super user gets some sense of how all of these values are being used across the whole database. So here, me as a global super user, I can see how many, what the usage is for my membership. So I can see my membership is using all of these numbers, but I can also see that other members in my database are using these values. So if I wanted to get rid of this, because I can see that other members are using it, I would know, well, I can't get rid of that, that value or make it local to myself because it's being used by other members in my database. So we would, again, be working with the members that choose to go together in the same database to decide who amongst them, and they would all have to agree who would get that level of permission. And we would probably want to see 2 per database. They don't have to be from the same membership, or they could be from the same membership. And the way that it works is, if you're not a global super user and you want to change to one of those values that apply to everyone, it's done through a notice. So you'll see this new little notices area up at the top here. This is where global super users can see requests that come in for changes to setup items. So if I'm a local super user and I want to change a shared publication, what happens when I view that list of shared publications is I see a link saying, you know, request a change. And when I request that change, it goes into the notices area so that the global super user can see that a change needs to be made and actually make that change and close the request. So it allows local super users to formally say that they need a change to something that applies to everyone and make that request. Okay. Any other questions that I can answer about the multi-member database before I move on to other things? And again, I'm happy to answer more questions later, and we'll be putting up some quite detailed videos, I hope, about how working in a multi-member database works. Okay. Well, let's move on then. Next on my list, we're going to talk about changes to communities. So, for those not familiar, we have created a new centralized communities repository where we hope to maintain descriptions of all the geography, hopefully across Canada in the long term, as a central source where everyone can access a consistent version of how geography is described, so that we don't end up with every single member having their own slightly different version of the communities and having them all get slightly out of date, where they only maintain their own local area and all the other areas sort of drift out of date. So having this centralized repository, we will be having volunteer data managers who are assigned particular regions across the province or across the country do the editorial work to keep those lists up to date. And then each of you have the ability to request an account in this communities repository to be able to download updates to your communities and load them right into the software, and it would update your communities table, as we used to call it. I would now prefer to just call it the communities, the CIOC communities list, because it's not really a table. The idea here being that we can get everybody on the same version with still some ability to customize locally in the same way that you do with the taxonomy. So The tools that do the updating work very similarly to the way the taxonomy tools do. The major difference here is with the taxonomy, for those of you who have done the taxonomy update in the software, we load the file and everybody has to use the same file. The difference here is you can actually choose a file from the community's repository and update to that file. So each of our members individually has control over what they load into their database, and of course you don't have to make use of that tool at all if you don't want to. That tool is available through Update Communities version, and we hope to be going through a process over the next month or two, working with Find Help, who has been working in our communities repository to try and do some updating, especially in Ontario, to do a rollout to our members and give them information on how to do their updating, and certainly walk them through the first update, which is going to be the most painful because some people have communities tables or communities lists that are 5 years plus out of date. As a result, the first update is likely to be a little bit painful with things not matching very well. So we do anticipate a little bit of moaning and groaning the first time we go through this process, and we'll work with people individually if needed to get everybody up to date the first time, and after that it should all go very smoothly in the same way that we have been able to work with the taxonomy updates. Part of our work with getting everyone on the same version and having the communities repository is adding some new features to how communities work in the software. And there are 3 aspects that have changed. One you should see right away here is add alternative search area. What is an alternative search area? An alternative search area is a grouping of communities that don't fall together nicely in the hierarchy of the community. So, for example, those in Ontario who have worked with their CCACs trying to patch together a LIN service area, which can cross other geographic boundaries and doesn't work very nicely to fit it inside the communities table hierarchy, but the reality is that you do have service records that may serve a LIN, and so trying to properly say what the service area is by describing the LIN in our current structure is a little bit tricky. So what we've done is given you the ability to create these new search areas where you give it a name of whatever you need. You can give it a parent community anywhere in the hierarchy, and then assign the areas that should be searched whenever someone uses that community. That alternative search area then works just like any other community in the database. So if I, for instance, entered in a LIN, that LIN would then become available to select from my data entry form. I could add it to the front page of my software in the search form under communities. So limit to located in serving, I could have the list of LINs here. If I created those LINs as alternative search areas in my database, I could have just a list of LINs here, and it would automatically compare that to the communities entered in the records and understand that each of the LINs has particular search communities. That's part of what you configure with the new alternative search area. So I can add, for instance, a whole bunch of things that whenever someone searched for, this, then what they're actually doing is this and this and this, and I can add as many of these as I need in order to do an appropriate search region. And again, once these are in place, they otherwise operate exactly like any other community in the database. So in addition to alternative search areas, we have made 2 other changes. One is the addition of a province country or province state field. This is because as we expand our borders, the ability or the number of occurrences of communities with the same name is really ramping up, and we need a way to be able to easily distinguish between communities. So you have the option of assigning a province, a country, and potentially also a province or state. We've got a humongous list of countries, provinces, states available to you here already. That should be part of your software upgrade. to each of your communities. And then if it finds two communities with the same name, it will make you distinguish which one you actually mean so that it can be more accurate. But still, on the front page of your search, it's going to show the one that you, just the simple name of the one you picked. So if I had London, Ontario, and I added that to the front page, but my software also had London, England as one of the communities, on my search page, it's going, I'll have picked London, Ontario, but it's just going to say London on the front page because we don't really want it to say, you know, here I have Ancaster, Barrie, Dundas, and then suddenly it says London, Ontario. Well, that doesn't really fit. It would just say London, and behind the scenes it would know that I meant London, Ontario because it made me pick between the two at the time that I did the data entry. And the same will hold true for all your data entry forms. If there are two communities with the same name and you start to type it in, I don't think I have any examples in here, but all of our suggestion boxes, if there were two with the same name, it would show the province and country in the list for you to pick from so that it understood the difference between them. So you wouldn't have to be guessing which meant which. And the same will hold true when you're doing your located and community data entry or your area served data entry. Any questions about that? Okay. So back to our communities editing. Our final change is our ability to have any number of alternate names. So you can add as many alternate names for each community as you need. We know that there are a lot of colloquial names for neighborhoods, for Aboriginal territories, everything like that. There can be many different reasons why there may be more than one name by which someone knows a community. You can add as many of those as you wish. And when you're using the tools for searching for communities, behind the scenes, it will automatically search in those alternative names so that the preferred name will pop up for them to select. So this is really, you won't be able to choose this per se from a list, so it will not display any of the alternative names anywhere, but anywhere where you're doing a search for a community, be that on a data entry form or from that search form where you type in a community, any of those, you can type in the alternative name and it will bring up the preferred community name. Okay, we have a question about a community that crosses the border between Saskatchewan and Alberta. So that is an alternative, can be set up as an alternative search area so that it can have, you could set up potentially half the community in each and then create a parent for it that searches the whole community across the two provinces if you want to set it up that way. But alternative search area is the way to go. And what I would recommend for anyone who's struggling with these sort of challenging communities, shall we say, is to post on the message board, and we'll try and make a particular recommendation of how to set it up for you. And in the long run, we hope that we'll be setting these up in the communities repository so that everyone will do it in a consistent way, and we'll have some particular recommendations about how to deal with particular scenarios. So I'm hoping if I get approached from some of our members about a particular challenge, you know, this is my situation, we can make an official list of recommendations of how to use the tools to set it up, and that everyone then handles the same challenge in the same way, and we can have really consistent information. But the alternative search areas should allow you to cope with that problem. The way it's set up behind the scenes might look a little icky, but in terms of searching, it should work perfectly. So once the setup is done, even if it's a bit gross to figure out how to set it up, once the setup is done in terms of you doing your data entry, it should be a piece of cake. You shouldn't, the people actually doing the searching and the data entry will not even notice what's going on. It should just work. Okay. Any other questions about the communities changes? So those are the the four. We've got our communities repository, and hopefully that everyone will be getting synchronized if they want to one version so that everyone's using the same values. We've got our province, state, and country to try and distinguish between communities of the same name. That are alternative names for single communities, and that applies to alternative search areas as well, which is the final feature to allow you to take communities that don't fit nicely in the hierarchy, for instance, a community that straddles two provinces, and have a way to group those together and do a search on a single community that might straddle other communities like that and not fit very nicely in the hierarchy. And there should be more communications going out, as I say, in the next month or two about getting everybody to the same version and using some of the tools like the communities repository. Okay, next we're going to be, I've got a hand up. I want to make sure. Oh, Angie, I've already answered your question. Okay. Next, here's the fun part, searching enhancements. Okay. Go to the main menu. So we've got quite a few new searching features with this release. I'll try and deal with the fun ones first. Probably the most fun one is our refine your search and recent searches feature. So let's do a search for fun. Okay, and 211. Ha ha ha. 211 is fun apparently. Here we go. So what you will see after your upgrade in your search results is this new Refine Search feature. So Refine Your Search allows you to take any list of records, be that browsed by organization, taxonomy searches, browsed by subject, even your saved searches or My List searches. Any search in the database, anywhere where it lists records in either the volunteer software or the community information software, you can now do Refine Your Search. Refine Your Search takes your existing criteria, whatever it might be, and sends it to the advanced search form. You can refine over and over and over again. So if I first refine to just those in Ontario, well, that still brings up 185. That's too many. I want to refine it further, and I want to say it also has the word children in it. So fun and children. Okay, now I'm down to 140. I can keep going over and over and over again and keep refining my search as many times as I want. And you can see it just keeps accumulating all my criteria. So you can add as many different criteria as you want. Just keep going back to the advanced search and continue to build and build and build your search. Eventually, I will warn you, if you do 10, 20 really complicated searches, eventually the software will go and just choke. But the amount of criteria you would have to add for that to happen is probably far beyond what's reasonable in terms of searching. But I do want to make sure people are aware that eventually you could get to that point where SQL Server, which is the database that runs underneath CIOC software, eventually will get a query length that's just too big, and it won't be able to handle the search. But that would be a really crazy, complicated search. So along with our Refine Your Search, we introduced recent searches. So next to your advanced search link, wherever that may be, depending on what kind of template you're using to lay out your header in the software, you'll see a new Recent Searches button. Recent Searches shows up to 20 of your most recent searches in the software. It will, as long as you've displayed the details of your search, which is, you can see right here where it says you perform a search for, as long as it's showing you the details of your search, then when you go into recent searches, it will also show the details of your search. If you have not shown the details of your search, so for instance, if you go through an advanced search and you haven't clicked display the details of my search, it will not tell you what the search was. So to make things easier for you, one of the features that we have added is that it remembers your preference for your whole session of whether you want to display the details of your search. So until you log out or until overnight, when we redo our sessions, it will remember your preference for displaying the details of your search and also whether you want to open your search results in a new window. Because we expect that most people will want to see the details of their search using the recent search feature. a little bit about what's available on this page. It shows you obviously when you did the search, how many records were returned, and the criteria of your search. You have the opportunity to perform that search again, and you can refine that search, which means send this criteria to the advanced search form to add additional criteria. If you put your mouse over the number of records, it will tell you which view you searched in, and also the language of your search if you're doing more than one language. What this means is I can switch into French, go to my recent searches, and I can search this again in French, the same search, and you'll see I get only 10 this time. And now if I put my mouse over it, it's going to tell me which view I was working in, and you can see now instead of saying I searched in English, it says I searched in French, and it's updated the count. Got a question here. One moment. Is the search feature available to email as a link? We have, that's in our features database. That's not something we've done for this release. I think we may end up doing it for the next release. We don't currently have the email your search results yet. Keep in mind you can copy and paste the link in your location bar to any email, and that will allow people to access any search criteria that they are allowed to see. So even most of your advanced search criteria would actually be available to the public. Kelly's asking about the features database. That's just the list of the features that we're planning for the software here. Okay, so if I perform an older search, so let's say I pick one, I'm going to switch back into English here. I don't have enough French records to be doing very good searches in French here. If I go back to one of my older searches, for instance, here's my search for homeowner associations, and I search it again, the next time I go into recent searches, it jumps to the top. So it doesn't recreate it, it actually bumped it up. So every time I search something that I have done in the past, it moves it to the top rather than doing it over and over again, so that the list of 20 that you get should all be unique. If you perform the same search twice, rather than putting two of the same search in your list, it actually bumps that search up to the top without replacing or without adding it again, so that you don't end up having multiple of the same search in your most 20, and that it's as useful as it can be. Note that if you switch languages, some of the information doesn't translate because it was stored in that language. So when I switched to French, you'll notice it didn't translate my criteria. It's not going to do that. So be aware that although you can easily switch to a different view or a different language, it's not going to translate your criteria because it saves the criteria at the time you run the search, which is why if you don't have the display the details of my search on, it doesn't have that information to save it with your search. So it can't automatically translate it if you switch to a different language. I just want to make sure everyone is clear about how that works. So, and you can see obviously the date is set in whatever language that I last ran that search in. So because I last ran this in French, the date is in French. I can tell I ran this one in French because the date is in French. Okay, I think I have another question here. Let's have a quick look. I've lost my questions panel. There we go. Okay. Oh, I think we're good. All right, so again, I can switch views and rerun my same searches in a different view. So if I wanted to run this again in my CCAC view, I can go to recent searches and run the same search again in a different view, and I would get whatever the criteria was, and it would update my count for the view that I ran it in last. Okay, so switching languages or switching views, and you can always do a refine of any of your most recent searches. Are there any questions about recent search or refine your search? Okay. Okay. Sorry, just checking my list here. Okay, we have a few minor changes to our childcare search form, which I'll briefly discuss. For those using all the childcare features, we've added the ability to match a specific child. So if you're attempting to identify care for a family of children and you're unable to match them all, you can use the Open in New window and run separate searches for each of the children one at a time, or keep running different combinations of searches using this match program set serve child and referencing a particular date of birth that you enter for that child. Also on this page, we've added the 1-year care required on button so that it would automatically adjust the children's ages by a year in order to do the matching on the age of the child. And the default has been changed for the matching to, I think it's gone from any to all. Clear my form and then I'll know. Yeah, so the default used to be to match any child, and the default is now to match all the children. I think that's all the changes to the child care form. Angie is asking if we can do the refine your search for the public. No, unfortunately not. Because the public doesn't have access to the advanced search form, we can't give them access at the moment to the refine your search feature. That's certainly a change we could make. We would have to make it so that the public would get sent to the basic search form again, rather than to the advanced search form. But at the moment, because it requires the advanced search form, we can't make it available to the public. However, it's not impossible to do, as I say. It's just that we would have to make allowances that it would detect if you weren't logged in, and instead of sending you to the advanced search form, it would do it with the basic search form. So it's certainly something we can pursue in the future. Hope that answers your question. Okay. Search history. All right. One minor change we've done with subjects, for those of you still using the Thesaurus, is we used to have a bit of an issue with, my view doesn't have the Thesaurus. Let's try a view with Thesaurus. Here we go. So yes, for those of you still using the Thesaurus, we've done a little bit of a correction in our count. See if I can find one here. Yes. So our with searches in the subject sidebar used to show the count of that subject. So for instance, let's say field of study is used in some way. In the past, this would show the usage of the subject field of study rather than what I would actually get if I clicked on it, which is a problem. So just as an example, let's see if I can find one. It actually has something. No luck. Here we go. So armed forces. You could see it had a count of 5, and when I click it, I actually get 5. But there are actually 46 records using armed forces, and in the older version of the software, the count it would have showed you was 46, which is incredibly misleading because when you clicked on it, you wouldn't have gotten 46 records. You would have only gotten 5. So what we've done is just fix that count so that the number it shows is actually what you get when you click on it. It's a minor change. For those of you, as I say, still using it. Okay. Our last change is a volunteer-specific search change, which I think I'm going to discuss with another feature. What we've done in the volunteer software is change the ability to show specific counts. You can see here, this is a big change for those of you familiar with the volunteer software. This doesn't say the number of individuals. So you now have the option of setting up your view to not show the individual count and just show the count of opportunities. as you can see that I've done here. A little later in the session, I'll explain why we made that change available because it connects in with another feature. Okay, so now we have, that's all our searching features. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to move on to the next section, which is setup and security changes. Okay. All right, first one is that we're making it clear in the list of views which ones are public. So we've had the unfortunate situation a few times that people have accidentally made data management views public and accessible to people without a login. Now that didn't mean that they had access to change records or anything like that, but it did potentially mean that they would have access to deleted or non-public records or fields that weren't intended to be made available to the public. So the change we've made here is to make it extremely clear which views are accessible to the public. So there shouldn't be any reason now for anyone to unknowingly make what should be a private view public because they are listed separately, and it should be very, very clear now which ones are private and which ones are public. In addition, if your agency exclusively owns one of the views, meaning only your agency can edit that view, it's going to have your agency code next to the view. Note that I'm not going to see views that are exclusively owned by another agency because I don't have permission to get access to them. So you're only going to see this with your agency code and the ones that your agency exclusively owns. It would be denoted with your 3-letter agency code in brackets so that it's clear to you which ones have been marked as being exclusively owned by you. Any questions about the changes to that list? This applies to views, but it also applies to templates and layouts in terms of the exclusively owned change. And speaking of templates and layouts, we've created a new user type option called a web developer. The web developer user type option is a way for you to give a third-party contractor or other designer that you might hire access into your database to make changes to your templates and layouts without having to give them the keys to the kingdom. The problem is if you wanted your designer to come in and make changes to your templates for you, you had to give them super user access, and that meant giving them access to areas of the software that you really didn't intend to give them access to. Now you can create a web developer user type, and they will only have access to the setup changes for templates and layouts. They will not be allowed to make any other setup changes. So it's really a major improvement to security to allow people to give the control needed to the designer without giving them access to things that they really shouldn't have access to. They will see their own version of the setup page that only links to templates and layouts. Okay, I'm going to go into the view setup now and talk a little bit about some of our social media changes. Which one? So we've added 2 new social media features. One is the ability to list the social media, I guess, various links that an agency or an organization may have, so the organization's Facebook page or their Twitter stream, and so on. And the other is the ability to have a sharing link available on the record details page. So this likely applies a bit more to the volunteer software, but it is available to both. If you add this share button to your view, then you will see an add this button. If anyone who's been to, say, CBC has made use of this service before, or they've seen this service before, it's basically a service that allows you to link to a whole bunch of different social media sites easily without having to individually program each one of those social media sites in. It allows the user to say what their own preferred social media sites are that they use, and it will default to showing the social media sites that that particular user likes to use. So here I am. This is what I'm talking about here. Here I've got my Add This application here. If you've ever seen that little orange plus there, that's the Add This icon. That's the service we use. If you want to have a better understanding of how Add This works and their privacy policy, you can read their privacy policy and understand how this feature works, because we are using a third-party service, and it's important that everyone is comfortable with the conditions of how this service works before they decide they want to use this feature. And of course, that privacy policy would be available to any of the users of your database if they want to understand how the service works. For users that use this service, they can say which social media sites that they prefer. You can see that this service has 322 more different kinds of social media that this can link up to, and the icons that are available here would be determined by that individual user's preferences. So there's certain defaults, and then the icons that are available are actually based on me as a user and what I prefer to use and what I tell Add This that I want to use. So I can set settings here that says which icons are available to me in this record. Again, we expect this to be a little bit more appropriate for the volunteer software, where people may want to share information on a volunteer opportunity and so on, but it is available for you to add to your records in either the volunteer software or the community information software if you wish. Here we go. We have a question. I've got two questions. Does a web developer view still have access to some of the super user tools? No. So the web developer is not in any way a super user. The only thing that they can change and set up are templates and layouts. No other setup is available to a web developer user at all. So they are not super users. It doesn't give them any privileges to records unless you set up their user type to have privileges to edit records. They would see whatever view you set them up to see, and they cannot change any other setup items. They're not super users. It's a completely different kind of permission that only gives access to changing templates and layouts. Someone's asking if we're sharing a public view. So yes, in that it's going to share whatever people have access to. So I'm logged into my database right now. And if I share this record on Facebook right now, it's going to send this link. But understand that if I sent this link to a member of the public, they would see it in a public view. So I can't, for instance, I cannot send a link to a private view to a member of the public, because even if I send them the link into the record, and at the time I was looking at what was a private record in a logged-in view, if a member of the public follows that link, it's going to send them to the public version of that page. So even if, say, you for your organization run a Facebook page and you want to promote some particular record, if you clicked the Facebook share to share this on your organization's Facebook page, and I'm in the data management view, it's not going to share the data management view of the record, because the link that you use is automatically going to be restricted to the public view for members of the public. There's no way for a member of the public who doesn't have a login to get access to the CIOC data management view just because you happen to be in it at the time that you click that button. So absolutely, it's going to be public if the person is public. At the same time, if a member of your staff click that link, it's going to show them the version of whatever view they're in, sort of their default view. So if their default view is a data management view, then that's the version that they would get if they clicked on that link. I hope that clarifies. If I can answer any more questions or clarify that any further, let me know. Is there a way of checking links that people put on their record? Okay, so that goes into the actual data entry of the records Facebook page. So I want to make sure there's a really clear understanding of the two different kinds of social media changes that we put in. So this one, which is the Add This service, is a way to share this record with others. Okay, so it's not this organization's Facebook page. It's not this organization's Twitter stream. This is, if I click this, it's going to post a link to this page on my personal Facebook page, okay? Or it's going to tweet a link to this page on my personal Twitter stream. It has nothing to do with the organization here other than it's a link to that record. So this is very different from the other feature that we put in the software, which is the social media fields that are about the record. Okay, I will demonstrate that as well. So we have two different features here. All right, and you can use either one of those or both. Whatever it is that is appropriate for your organization. You don't have to use either of those, any of the features if you don't want to, but I want to make sure everyone really understands these are two different features. We just happen to put them in at the same time in the same release, but they're very different features. I, in fact, might as well just go ahead and show you the social media setup. So we've built in quite a large number of social media fields into the software that you have the option of putting on your data entry form. So now we're on the other part of the social media changes where you actually are going to put in information about the organization or about the volunteer opportunity, okay? So these fields are available on either the volunteer software or the community information software, all right? In the setup, you will have received this entire list, and you have the option of activating or deactivating just the ones you want to use. So if I didn't want to use Blogger, I can go in and take off the check mark, and it will not appear on my data entry form. So if you just wanted to have, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and that's all you cared about to have on your data entry form, you could just deactivate all the rest. You don't have to use them all. You can decide which ones are appropriate for what you're working with. Okay. Once if you want to add a service that's not here, you need to talk to us. And the reason you need to talk to us is we have to install the icons appropriately in the software for you to add a new type of social media. So we have absolutely no problem with adding additional services. We picked the ones that we thought were most likely appropriate for our volunteer software and our community information software. But if you would like another kind of social media site added to our list, please be in touch with us. We have a huge set of icons that all match each other, and we'll find the icon for that service, install it in the software, and then you'll have the ability to add it to your data entry form. So what does this actually look like in the data entry? I'm going to do a quick search because now we can actually do advanced search on the new field that's called social media. There we go. I'm going to look for one that has some content. Also, you have access to a checklist search for social media, just FYI. So if you wanted to find all of the records that had Facebook pages, it's that easy. Has any from Facebook, and it would search through all your records and find all the ones that had Facebook pages, or find me all the records that don't have Facebook pages, or all the ones that have WordPress pages or YouTube accounts, and you can make use of that checklist search to actually locate specific records that use or don't use any particular type of social media. But in the meantime, I'm just going to look for a record where I've entered any kind of social media information at all. Okay, so I have a few test ones here. So here's what it looks like. This has got weird stuff here, but this is what it would look like. So it'll have whatever links you've provided, and then the icons and so on. So this would be information about this specific record, okay? So that's different from this. It's about this organization and their particular records. When I do the data entry, there we go. this is what our data entry form looks like. So the specific sites that are listed here will depend on what you've done in your setup. So if you've hidden Blogger and Flickr, they won't appear in this list. The links here are to the main sites for that service. That's really so that if people don't understand what those services are, they can visit the site of the service to get information about it. And the same would be true on the feedback form. The feedback form looks exactly like this. So if the person doing the data entry on the feedback form isn't sure about what a particular service is, they can click on the link and it would take them to the main page of that particular social media service. And then, of course, you can enter in the specific addresses for each type of service. There's a question about this being on the volunteer side. Absolutely. So the social media fields, if they're entered on the organization, it carries over into the volunteer side. So that's one thing. So if I've set up a Facebook page for the organization, then in the little section on the volunteer opportunity, that's information about the organization, you will see it there. But you can also add this to the data entry form for your volunteer opportunity. So if there's a special Facebook page or special YouTube channel that's just about that volunteer opportunity, because maybe it's a special event like a bike race or something and there's special social media links for that particular opportunity, you can actually set them up for the opportunity. So there's setting it up for the organization, and there's a whole other set you can set up for the specific opportunity as well. If you want to start using these fields, you have to add them to your form. So you have to add them to your record details pages, your feedback forms, and your update forms. The field is called social_media. And again, the feedback page looks just like this. So it's not a big blob of all of the social media fields that you then have to crawl through when you're processing the feedback. If someone, say, added a LinkedIn, it would appear right under the LinkedIn here, and you'd be able to click the update button and everything. It works just like as if these were all individual fields, okay? So it's not, the feedback form is not just a big blob. All right, here's the feedback form. It looks exactly like the data entry form. We create a help box. So right now, the field help is not standardized. What I'm hoping is that we're going to have a standardized release of field help with the next release of our software. The next release of the software is supposed to complete all the page help that's missing in the software. And along with that, I hope we will have standardized field help available for every single field in the software, and then people have the option with the upgrade of getting all the standard field help along with that upgrade if they want it. Okay, there are some questions about the specific kinds of social media. So we can certainly help you out in understanding what all of these social media things are if you're not familiar. So all you have to do is post on the message board, and we'll do our best to give you a sense of what the sites are and how they would be used. I'm going to highlight two. Kelly's asking specifically about RSS. You'll notice that two of these are not linked, podcasts and RSS. They're not linked because they're not a special site, unlike Facebook, which is a website that a company runs and people have pages on that site. A podcast or an RSS field are a thing. They're not a place. So anybody can create an RSS field. CIOC itself has an RSS field that runs off their message board. You can have RSS fields for news sites and all kinds of things. Just on your regular website, you could create your own RSS field. It has nothing to do with any particular service. So we can't create a link to RSS because, in a generic way, because it may be hosted on the person's own website. All RSS is usually a short description that links to something more substantial. So in the case of a news article, it might have the headline of the article and a small blurb that is a little teaser to tell you what the article is going to be about, as an example. There's a way that RSS is supposed to be formatted so that RSS readers can do something with it. So if the site or if the organization in question has an RSS field, it's likely, or RSS feed, it's likely to be something on their own website, something like that. And you could try opening it in an RSS reader to make sure that what they're providing is actually a legitimate RSS service. But if you don't feel comfortable with that service because you don't understand how to check it properly or work with it, just don't include it on your forms, would be my recommendation. Same with podcasts. A podcast isn't, a uniform service that, everybody does podcasts this way and they're all on iTunes or something. That's not, a podcast is just a thing. It's a way of doing something. And so people could publish their podcast on their own website, or maybe they publish it through iTunes, or there could be any number of ways in which someone provides access to a podcast. So it's not like there's one site that we could link to say, oh, here's where all the podcasts go. It's just a way of doing things. And if you're not comfortable with that being mixed in with the rest, I would say just take it off your forms. But it's not a uniform service that everyone does the same way. Okay. Mark's linking to our RSS field on our community site, and I don't think I can actually copy that for everyone to see, unfortunately. But I can probably follow Mark's lead here and go to our community site and show you what RSS looks like. If I can find the RSS link here. Here we go, RSS feed. Oh, this is editing the RSS feed. Here we go. So this is an RSS feed. This is what my web browser is interpreting the RSS feed to be, and it's asking me if I want to add it to my Firefox RSS, my live bookmark. Okay, so you can see it's got a list of the titles, a link to the full article, date information. In some cases, an RSS feed will provide just a little bit of detail about each of the links that it's providing. It's just a way to get updates. So usually something that people might provide to publish their website updates or recent news, such that people can get it in a way that's not email. So it's kind of a replacement for what people used to use email lists for. A lot of people use RSS in replacement of email lists, email distribution lists. Okay. And Kelly's asking, on the community information record, is the idea that we send them to the organization's RSS feed? Yes. So if you decide to use RSS as one of the social media types that you make available, then this would be if the organization had an RSS feed, say, on their website for people to get news and updates, it would be a link to the RSS feed that belongs to the organization. That would be the purpose. And again, if it doesn't work for you, if it's not the kind of information you want to keep, just hide it. Don't use it on your forms. You can be picky. You can have as few of these as you would like. You don't have to use all of these. We tried to pick things that we thought were most likely to apply to organization and volunteer opportunities. And there are hundreds of types of social media out there, so they just don't all apply. And certainly they have varying levels of popularity. But if you come up with one that you think should be in our list that we don't have, just let us know. Okay, so there's the social media stuff. Unless there's any more questions, I'll move on to the next thing. All right, so next in our list. I've already gone to the publications page, so you've already kind of had a hint of this. We've completely changed the way our publications management page looks. This is an example as a global super user in a multi-member database. So you're not going to see something as complicated as this. But what I want to highlight to you is the fact that we stopped putting our publications in a drop-down list and instead made a report for your publications page. So it's going to include the code, the name if applicable, tell you whether it's non-public, tell you if it has headings, give you a link to view the list of headings for that publication. You're not going to see local and other records. This, again, is a multi-member database thing. So local would be my membership, and other would be other members in my database that are using it. You will just see records. It will just say records, and we'll show you the count of the records in your database that are using it. We've also highlighted for you the number of views that are using a publication. So for those of you who set up publication-based views in your database because you have a special purpose portal, it's going to give you an indication of how many of your views are using that publication. And we've done an equivalent thing with our headings report. So it's going to show you whether it's non-public, whether it's being used by records, whether it has any related headings, again, the usage by records, and whether it's being used in a quick list being the, on the front page, your drop-down or category search from your main page here, quick list, which can be made up of publications or headings. So now you can see clearly how often any particular publication code or heading is being used in a quick list. You don't see that on the main publications page, but if you do print version, you get more information. Okay, so you would actually see the views and quick list information on the print report. It's not available. This is not working right. It's not available on the main page because it would just make the page too big, but if you do your print report, it's going to show you all of the different language names for your codes. If you've hidden them, you'll see a slash through them like you see here. That means I've said I don't use that. That applies to a multi-member database. And it should show you all of the quick list usage that you have for that particular publication. And I think that's because, yeah, I'll have to look into that. So that's the changes that we've made to both the headings report and the publications report. So you just have more detail about each one. Okay. We've made some changes to the way we link records everywhere in the database. So we had a lot of places where in a list of records, such as on your deleted record page, we just always linked it. And in a lot of cases, it might not have been available on the particular view you're working in. And if you clicked on it, you would have actually gotten a security failure, which was incredibly useful. So the change that we've made is it's only going to link to the record if that record is actually available in the view that you're working in. So if I'm in the public view and I go, you'll notice, wow, none of these are linked because deleted records are not available in this view. So I won't be clicking on them and then getting a security failure. So if you are working in say your statistics pages or your deleted records page or pretty much anywhere where we provide a list of records like this, if that record is not available in your current view, it will no longer be linked. So a minor change, but hopefully it avoids some of those minor annoyances. All right. Next in my list. Okay, so now we're into our data management changes. We already have discussed the social media field changes. So I'll go into, I'll follow up a little bit more with our deleted records page. So we've now added an indication of why a record can't be permanently deleted. It used to be that the little checkbox just wouldn't show up and the link wouldn't show up if a record couldn't be permanently deleted for some reason, but we didn't tell you why that record couldn't be permanently deleted, which meant you couldn't do anything to fix the situation. So we have a key now at the top of the page that tells you reasons why a record can't be permanently deleted. The key is going to be different depending on whether you're working in the volunteer software or the community information software. And if you, see if I can find one here that can't be permanently deleted. There we go. Okay. So here's a case. In this case, B, it means there's a volunteer opportunity associated with this record, and that's why I can't permanently delete it. So whatever the reason may be, you can consult the legend, and it will tell you the reason why you can't permanently delete that record. This applies to both the volunteer software and the community information software. Speaking of deletion, we've added 2 new fields to the software, or a new field and a new feature. The new field is the deleted by field. So from now on, whenever someone deletes a record, it's tagged with their name or initials, just like it would be when you create a record or update a record or modify a record. There's now a deleted by field that says who did the deleting. If you want access to that field on your record details page, you simply go into your view setup and add deleted by into your record details page, and you'll be able to see who did the deleting for any deleted record. In addition, we started tracking change history on the deletion date field. That means that if a record is deleted and restored and deleted and restored, we would have a full history of every time that record was changed. So we would know the full history of every time that record was either deleted or restored, and also who did it each time. So it's just a bit of traceability. Now, we don't currently have anywhere for you to view that history. I hope in the long run to make it available through this deleted records page. But if we do run into a serious situation where something has been happening to records and people need to know about the history of a record because there's some problem that's been going on and they need to understand what happened, they can contact us in the meantime, and we can give them access to the history of that deletion date and deleted by. Okay? And if you just want the deleted by, because you want to know who did the deleting, again, that's a field that you can add to your view setup for the record details page if you want to be able to see that. And hopefully in the long run, from this deleted records page, we will give you access to the full deletion history of a record. We probably need to give it to you somewhere else as well, just because if a record has been restored, you may want to know who restored it. Okay. Any questions about the changes to the deleted records page or the deletion history or anything like that? Okay. Next, we'll do some bulk tool demonstrations. So we've made some changes to the way our bulk tools work. Do my little search for fun here again. And we'll do a bit of a demonstration about our new add remove tool. So, yay, more than one publication at a time. So instead of just picking one from the drop-down, you can add multiple publication codes to a record or remove multiple publication codes from a record in one go. You can also use the delete all values feature to remove all the publication codes in a record or all the distribution codes in the record at one time. Understand that what you can add and remove and what happens when you do delete all depends on what publications or headings or whatever you have access to. So from the view I'm working in, if I'm working in a view that can only see maybe 5 publications, and that's done in the view setup, whatever's in my quick list here, that is all that will be deleted. So if I'm working in a limited view that only has access to very specific publication codes, those are the only ones that I would be allowed to add and remove from those records. So even if I did delete all, it's not going to allow me to remove publications that I don't have permission to work with. So it still applies proper security, even with the delete all feature. Now the specific things that this is things that this is available on is detailed in our feature database. So the delete all, for example, is only available, I believe, in distributions and publications. And and classification. So that's going to account for Thesaurus, taxonomy, all of those as well. The add multiple values, I know, is only available distribution, publication. But if I go to, let's see, yeah, so NAICS, I have delete all values, but you can see I can still only add and remove one at a time. So the adding the multiple is publications and distributions, and the clear all should be available for any of the ones that say add remove. So it's going to be headings, subject, taxonomy. You can wipe all the values in one go for many of the selected records instead of having to individually go in and clear the values one at a time. Any questions about those changes? Okay. Next, I'm going to cover the volunteer feature. So we've changed the way that we structure the number of positions field. Oh, and there's another feature, the show all link. In the volunteer software, all your browse, you can click show all to view everything. So you don't have to individually click through all the records. You can just click show all and it'll show you the whole list. Okay. So this is our new, I have renamed, and we recommend that you rename the number of positions field to say areas of need. Obviously the choice of what you call your fields is up to you, but the new recommended name of this field instead of number of positions is called areas of need. And the reason we're recommending that you change the name is that number of positions is now completely optional. You only have to tick next to the community that it applies to or the communities that it applies to. You do not have to provide a number of positions anymore. We found that this is often giving very misleading information, so we've made the count optional, and that goes in with the search feature I showed earlier where you no longer have to show the number of individuals on the search page. It's because we've made the number of individuals for each community an optional feature. If you choose to have a total number of positions that apply across all the communities, we have this new total number of positions field. And so if you wanted to say the specific communities and then have a count that applied across all the communities, you could just fill in this part and leave this blank. So it's no longer about how many individuals you put. It's about whether you check off the box next to the community. And as always, you can still do the add a specific new community that's not in your list, okay? And all I have to do is check it off. I don't have to provide a number of positions. Any questions about that change? Okay. While I'm in the volunteer software, this is a good moment to talk about our new skills experience checklist. So our skills experience field now has an optional checklist component. The way that it will happen when you're upgraded is you will not get the checklist right off the bat. So you'll have to decide you want to start using the checklist. We didn't want to shock people by suddenly changing their data entry forms. We have a list that was provided to us by values that were chosen by a Volunteer Canada working group. So if you would like to have this list given to you, we'll happily give it to you. You could also create your own list or decide not to use the checklist component at all and just continue to use the free text box as it's always been. So this is an optional change, but if you do choose to use it, what will happen is the specific skills you check off will become searchable, and it can also be it can be searched either through the record details or through the advanced search using the checklist search. So I can do a has any. I'll bring up. So now under skills experience, if I use the new checklist, then the specific skills that I check off become searchable, and I can perform a new search for records that use that have that particular skill listing. In the long run, and I should say the short run, within the next month or two, we hope to also allow you to optionally add the skill search to your public search if you want to. So again, that will be totally optional. You do not have to make use of this change if it's not of interest to you, but the feature is there if you do want to use it. Okay, any questions about that one? All right, next we'll flip back to the community information software. I'm going to talk a bit about the ability to add general headings editing to your data entry form. I want to show all here. There we go. Zoom tech. Sounds good. I can't update this record. I would have to log in. So long and short, I have to log out and log in again to show it. Long and the short of it is, you can add your general headings field to your data entry form if you want to. So the process is, from your publications, if you have not already done so, you have to make it a field. So if I take this S publication as an example, if I want to make this a field that I can edit on the data entry forms and show on the record detail pages, I have to say allow on display and forms, and then I update it. Once that happens, I can go to my setup screen, which I'll go to right now, and in my field display, I can give that a name. So I will look for S headings. Here are my new S publication fields. So NP is going to include any non-public headings you have. That's the one that's going to go on your data entry form. You have S headings, which is going to exclude any non-public headings. You can use that on your feedback forms or your record details pages. And if you have publication descriptions, that's what this would be. So I'm going to take this S headings. I can update value for that field. So now it has a friendly name. The next step would be to go into your view setup, and from your view setup, you can then add that. I'll go into my data management view here, which is the one I'm using. Go to my update field. I can add my new. Come on. Here we go. S headings. So here's my new field, S headings. I'm going to say put this into publication view description and headings. I'll update it. Okay. Then when I go to update a record, which doesn't matter where I'm going, change my view to my regular view here. Let's try this again. I need something that belongs to the publication S in order for this to work. So it already has to belong to the particular publication in order for the field to show up on the data entry form. So here I picked a record that has the publication code S already in the record. And it should be, here we go. So here are various headings forms that I've added to my data entry form. I will only see the ones that I've A, added to my entry form, and B, where that record belongs to that publication. So here's my CCAC publication headings. If this record did not belong to the CCAC publication, I would not get this on the data entry form for that record. So here's my new S headings. That's the field that I just made, so I can now do the data entry and pick the headings right from the data entry form if I want to. Okay, so that's the change that we've made. You'll see here, these are groups. This is if you use the heading group feature, it will group the headings on the data entry form. That's why they're in batches like this. For those of you who haven't used the heading grouping feature, that's why some of them are listed separately. Are there any questions about how that works? We're still trying to decide what to do for people who have hundreds of headings, what the user interface should be like. So this feature at the moment is really designed for people who don't have 100 plus headings, because it does show the full list. So we do plan to revisit this feature in the future to decide a better way to do the data entry if your record has, or if your publication has 50 plus headings in it, so that we don't have all of them listed and only list the ones you selected and give you an easy way to search for ones to add. Okay, are there any questions about how that works? Again, the steps are, you have to make this a publication field. by doing add to forms and display. Then you can give it a name through the field display setup. Then you can add it to your views. And then as long as that publication code is added to that record, or you're working in a publication view that automatically adds the publication code to the record, then it will be present on your data entry forms. All right, our next feature is about doing email update requests. We now allow multiple values. So in your standard email update text editing area, you'll now have your default message, which is what you'll have after you upgrade, and you can add as many additional messages as you wish. They'll have all the same editing features as they always had, so the editing form should be familiar to those of you who've worked in the setup. And you can only have one default per database, so be aware of this. There must be one at a time that's a default. If you change, if I say make this the default message, it will remove whatever is currently the default and make this the default. You can only have one default at a time. When you actually go to do the emailing, bring up a record here. You'll now have the option to choose from your list of update messages, okay? And it would, and you still have the same option to customize the message at the time you send it that you always had. This applies to the volunteer software and the community information software, and you can have as many different messages as you wish. Any questions about that? Okay, that covers off all of our data management changes, I believe. Yep. So I have a little brief bit of information on import-export changes. The first and most important thing that I want everyone to be aware of is that we have removed the two deprecated export formats. So we've been warning for about 3 years now that we had two older formats in the export area that we were going to get rid of. One is the Eddie-based export, and the other was the Microsoft Saved Record Set version 1. As of this release, those two are gone. So I'm hoping that the many years of notice that we gave that they were going away meant that everyone had time to adjust and move on, because they are gone and we're not coming back. And the reason that we removed them is our newer version formats all work with export profiles. And export profiles are now mandatory. That's another one of the changes that we've made. Every export that you do must use an export profile. This is for security reasons, because our third change is that every export profile is assigned to particular views in the software. That means that it's now easier to give people restricted export privileges where they can only get access to certain kinds of profiles. In the past, you either gave people export privileges or you didn't, and this was a major problem because often that allowed people to export data that you didn't actually want them to have access to. By putting in this change, you can now give them the ability to export just the parts of the record that you want them to have access to instead of every single field if they wanted. So as of the upgrade, all of your export profiles will automatically become available in all of your views. This is because we don't want to change the way your current setup works. So we recommend that you go back into your setup and take your export profiles out of the views that you don't want them in. Now, this is not going to give access to anyone that didn't already have it, right? Because you still have to have export privileges, and currently everyone in every view can get access to everything. So we're not sort of opening up the floodgates to people who didn't previously have access. We're maintaining the status quo during the upgrade, and we're recommending that you go back after the upgrade and take away access that you don't really need to give. So if you don't want your export profiles in specific views, that you know, maybe you lease view to a partner and you want to give them export privileges, but only to this particular export profile, then you should take all the other ones out of their view so that they don't get access to them. And we can certainly, if you need some guidance we're happy to give you some guidance about how to do that. It's all controlled in the export setup. So under export profiles, it now has a list of all the views in your database. So by default, after your upgrade, they're all going to be checked like this. You will have to come in after the fact if you want to tighten up your security and uncheck the ones that you don't want to have a particular export profile available in. So it's now going to work exactly the same way that print profiles and Excel profiles already work. So those two tools already restricted access by view. It was just our export profiles that didn't have the proper security of allowing you to choose which views it was available in. And now we've made that change, that it's very specific to the views that you want. So again, after the upgrade, it's going to be available everywhere. This is so that everything works exactly the same way as it does now for you. But you should go in and take it out of the views that it doesn't belong in for any of the export profiles that you have. Along with this, we've now provided a count of the fields, distributions, and publications that are part of each export profile to make it a little bit easier to maintain. We've done the same in print profiles to show you a bit more information about how your setup is done, since it does occur on a different page. And the publication setup here is now applicable to what we call our XML record set format. It used to be you had to pick an export publication in the general setup options, and you were only allowed to have one for your export for the whole database. Now, whatever you have set up in your export profile is what you get. So I can actually export 5 different sets of general headings in one export if I want to. I'm not confined to just one publication anymore. It's whatever I set up in the profile, so I can add as many as I want. And it will only export the specific values that I have chosen. And that holds true for the publication field as well. So if I do an export of the publication field, it will only export the specific publications codes that I've added to my profile. So it means that if you're sharing data with a partner, you only have to give them the data that applies to them. I know this is getting into the heavy setup, so if you're not sure what to do with this information right now, we can certainly follow up with you further on the message board, and Chris is putting out far more detailed videos than what I'm going through right now to give people help with this feature. Also, we are having our follow-up session on Tuesday, so anything that is hard to digest right now, once you have the software in your hands, that session on Tuesday is meant to allow you to come on and ask questions and get some help with the new features once you actually have the new software and are able to work with it and have more specific questions about how to change your setup. So again, Tuesday is the follow-up session after the upgrade. If you have any questions at that point, we'll hopefully be there to really give you some more one-on-one assistance with the upgrade if you have specific questions at that time. For those who use our import-export tools, we have a few minor changes to our import area. In the list of, add records, here we go. It used to be when you were adding records, all you got was the record number. It didn't give you the name or any other information about what you were adding into the database. The new version will show you the name of the record, and as always, you can view the data, but you get far more detailed information about brand new records that you're adding into the software, so that you're not just blindly adding a whole bunch of records based on a list of record numbers. And that is everything in our import-export for the moment. Next, we've made some changes to our volunteer profiles. I'm going to flip into the volunteer software quickly. So we've made a little bit of wording changes to how our volunteer profile verification process works. We are still always open for suggestions to how we can improve this process. If you get feedback from your users, the people who are signing up for profiles, if they're having trouble or they have suggestions on how to improve that process, we're still very much open to making further improvements. So, you know, please, anytime. We've done our best for the moment based on the specific feedback that we got about changes to be made to that process. The more visible change that we've made for the actual staff users of the software is we started to give limited access to profiles where the user hasn't agreed to be contacted. We had a challenge where if they didn't agree to be contacted, all of their contact information was blocked in this profile search area, to the point that if the person was a problem, you couldn't even get access to block the profile because you couldn't look them up in the database. So what we've done is try and give them some anonymity. I'll do a search for someone who hasn't been agreed to be contacted. We've given them a bit of anonymity by anonymizing the first, last name, and email, while still allowing you to get access to block their information and to find out if they're doing applications. If they do an application, that is public, so they have to explicitly submit their contact information if they do an application. So in this case, if I click list applications, I would get access to whatever contact information they provided at the time of an application. But you can see that I now can get access to block them. It allows you, if you have someone who's doing something completely inappropriate and they haven't given contact consent, you can still get in and block them and locate their profile and get information about it, but it respects the fact that they haven't actually given consent to have their contact information distributed. And we may be doing, I expect we will be doing further enhancements about what to do with private information and consent and all of that in the future. This is just one more little step forward in terms of handling the contact consent, privacy policy consent, and all of that. So it's, as I say, at least a small step forward. Just a few more minor things here. So we've made some changes to how we work with our statistics. We've done some caching of our statistics, meaning we only are updating the statistics that you see in your record details once a day. That actually has, we've now put it into the current version of software that everyone's using now. This is just to improve performance, and we need to continue to make changes to improve the performance of our statistics, because your sites are very popular, and we have millions and millions and millions of statistics in each of our databases, and unfortunately that makes the databases very large and in some cases very slow. So that continues to be an area that we need to work on in terms of performance. On your statistics pages, we've now incorporated deleted records. We had quite a significant problem with permanently deleted records and not being able to retrieve those records when you did your statistical report. So the change that we've made is that if you do permanently delete a record, it's still going to show up. I'm going to have to go to the information database. If you do permanently delete a record, it's still going to show up at the bottom, very, very bottom. All of the permanently deleted records will get lumped together in unknown. So at least you get the count. We can know, if you permanently delete the record, we no longer know which record a particular statistic was associated with. And in the past, that meant that it just didn't get counted. And that's part of why we encouraged people to keep their statistics and their deleted records deleted at the same time so that everything matched up nicely and you didn't have this problem. But we've at least made the accommodation that if you do permanently delete a record but you're keeping your statistics, you can at least get that in your count, even though you no longer have a record to tie it back to. Now our taxonomy tools, and then we're done. Okay, so quite thinking advanced, basic. Some quite detailed activation tool changes in this release. There are a couple of brand new tools that we've added for this release. One is our activation tool. instead of having to go individually into each record to do your taxonomy management, you can actually do your activations and deactivations using a drill down type of search. Let's switch to global care. The global versus local, if you see me switch between global and local, this is for a multi-member database. In a multi-member database, a global activation applies to everyone. Everyone has to work within the umbrella of the global activation and then can do their own local activations inside that window. For those of you who are working in a single-member database, which is everybody after the upgrade, you're only going to see what we would think of as a global activation because you're not sharing your database with anyone else and you don't have to worry about coordinating your taxonomy. So this is what your taxonomy activation tool is going to look like. We have rolled up terms. This little red arrow shows me that this term is currently rolled up. The orange arrow allows me to roll a term up, meaning it becomes a use reference for the term above it. The red X is to deactivate a term, and the green check mark is to activate a term. This follows particular rules, so it doesn't let me do things that are inappropriate, such as trying to roll up a term that has no active term above it. You can't make something a use reference if nothing above it is active. So it will not allow you to roll up a term unless there's an active term above it, for example. It also won't allow you to activate something at level 2 and then leave nothing active and then suddenly activate something at level 6 on the same branch. So it enforces some rules to try and help people use good behavior in doing their activations. Okay, so if I click active, that's instantly activated. So I don't have to submit the form or anything. It just automatically does activation, inactivation, roll up as soon as I click on it. Okay, it's all instant, so there's no saving. Be aware, I can't just play around with it and then not submit my changes. If I click activation, it activates right that minute. On the good hand, it will not let you deactivate something in use. So you'll see I don't have a deactivation button next to food banks because that term is currently in use, or next to any of these ones where records are attached. So it can detect cases where it's inappropriate to do activation or inactivation based on particular rules that are based on best practices. Okay, so in this case, the count, because I'm in a multi-member database, it's also not going to let me globally deactivate a record that's in use by another member, for example, because this is a global activation applies to everybody, and then a local activation just applies to me and my membership. So along with this activation tool, we have created a recommendation report. The recommendation report uses best practices around the taxonomy in terms of activating at only one level on a branch, and all those lovely ways that everyone is supposed to be using their taxonomy. It uses those rules to make recommendations to you about what to activate or inactivate. Depending on the state of your database and how closely you tend to work on your activations, your report may be really enormous, like mine. Mine in this database is humongous because obviously this being a test database, I don't tend to do a lot of tweaking of my activation. There are two kinds of recommendations it's going to make. The first section is generally going to recommend places that you're going to inactivate your taxonomy because it's not being used in any records, and generally you've already got something else active on the same branch. So in the case of Rent-A-Tree, the likely situation is I have another active term with records on the same branch, so it doesn't think that I should be activating this particular term because it's not in use and I have another active term on the same branch. If I choose to have it suggest new activations, which is optional, it will suggest areas where I have other activations at the same level, or but I haven't activated a particular term, or if I have absolutely nothing active on the branch, then it will make some recommendations about activating on that branch. You do not have to accept the recommendation, so I would actually recommend that you individually go through and make thoughtful decisions about which recommendations you want to pick. But in the end, if you just accept all the recommendations, it's not going to do anything dangerous. So it's not going to inactivate anything that you're currently using. And it's not, and the activation suggestions are going to be places where you, for instance, got a taxonomy upgrade and there's a whole new branch of the taxonomy. It's going to identify those areas for you so that you can potentially begin using it. If you do accept all the activations, what's likely to happen is it's going to activate at multiple levels of a branch if you never had that branch open. And as soon as you start assigning terms to records, it's going to start recommending that you inactivate at the levels that you're not using so that you follow the recommended practice of not activating at multiple levels of the taxonomy. We still have the old multi-level activation report as well, which doesn't actually do anything. It just makes the recommendations. It just gives you the report of places where you've activated at multiple levels, as opposed to the activation tool, which actually will make changes. So that if you submit it in the activation tool, it will actually accept those recommendations and make those activations or inactivations for you. Are there any questions about how that tool works? There will be a detailed video discussing how to use these tools specifically, so don't take it that this is it for demonstrations. We will have a specific training video up on YouTube that talks about how these activation tools work so that you can use it as a better reference than what I'm doing today. And of course, once you have it in your hands, if you have any specific questions on Tuesday for that session, then we'll be happy to answer questions. And that is it. So if I'm happy to answer any questions you have now, either about the features or the upgrade this weekend. And otherwise, we'll call it a day, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Tuesday for the follow-up session. Okay, I will stay on for the next couple of minutes for anyone who has any questions, and otherwise, everyone have a nice weekend.